Hi, my name is Ellie Drew, and I want to share with you my cannabis story. I had a friend who was dying over in California, and she was in home hospice. And my very first experience with cannabis was seeing how the compassionate care group over there came to the house, and they gave them some education about the benefits of cannabis, particularly at the time of death, and to help ease that transition. And they didn't ever use the plant, and they were thrilled to be able to try it and have it. And I can tell you it was a beautiful experience. Because at the end of life, morphine can make people constipated. And then with the constipation, you have to take diarrheal medicine. And then you have to take other kinds of medicines, instead of using this beautiful natural plant. So at the time when I saw this happen, I thought it was, well, this is a little racy. And when I saw how beautiful her experience was, it really did open my mind in a way that it had not been opened before. Then, about 4 years ago, I was in the most stressful time of my life. I'm not going to go into the whole story about what it was, but I will tell you briefly. My dad had cancer of his face, and he ended up losing half of his face. I was having to deal with his estate because I was in charge of that. I was traveling to China 5 times a year to teach in 12 months. I was moving and house hunting first, and then moving from Tucson, Arizona to Prescott, Arizona. And I was getting death threats when my dad died from one of my brothers because he didn't want to sell the farm, and in his alcoholic behavior, he was crazy, delusional, and I got the brunt of that. So we can typically handle 1 and 2 things that are snowballing upon us. But when you get hit with 3 and 4 and 5 things all at one time, it can really wipe you out and just overload the system with stress. And that's what had happened to me. On top of that, living in Tucson, it had ruined my sinuses. I had lived there for 15 years, moving there from Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, to a desert in Tucson. And I got what's called vasomotor rhinitis, where you have a constant dripping down the back of the throat. And the 3 pharmaceutical drugs that I was using stopped working and were no help at all. So in the middle of the night, when I was getting the deepest sleep, I would be waking up constantly from a dead sleep because I was coughing. So I was aging rapidly with all of this stress. September, October, and November of 2015 were particularly stressful. In September, I was in China teaching. In October, I went from Tucson, Arizona to Minnesota to take care of my dad. In November, I went back to China. So I had 4 days on each end of my Minnesota trip to take care of my dad, to get ready to either recover from being in China or to go back there for teaching again. When I got back from China in 2014 in November, I was so exhausted. I was exhausted to my bones. And I was so tired I couldn't even read, which is what I normally do to relieve my stress. And I was laying in the, vegetating truly, in my media chair, and all I could do was stare at Netflix to go, what can I watch? And I kept seeing medical marijuana documentaries. Well, I knew nothing about marijuana except for what I had experienced with my friend. And so I decided to watch one. And then I watched the next one. And then the next one. And on I became addicted to medical marijuana documentaries. And the more I watched them, the more angry I became. Then I got onto the internet. I watched everything I could about medical marijuana and the injustice that I was seeing with this healing plant and the healings that people were having. And why is our government regulating this healing plant that has had so much research done on it? It made absolutely no sense. By the time I watched the CNN correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, his weed documentary, and he's got 3 now. By the time I watched his weed documentary, and I cried through the whole thing, watching Charlotte and the other, what they call cannabis refugees that are moving to Colorado because it's a legal state so that they can get the medicine they need for their children who've got severe epilepsy. And the only thing the pharmaceutical companies have to offer them are very harsh and strong drugs that literally kill these children. The father found out, and he was in Afghanistan. He happened to see one tiny little blurb on the internet that said that their epileptic child had been using cannabis. And they lived in Colorado, and they were able to get the kind of medicine that little Charlotte needed. When I watched that video, I said, I don't have the ability to save my dad, because when I watched the Rick Simpson oil story, I found out that for 70 years, it has been known that the kind of face cancer my dad had could have been cured with the Rick Simpson cannabis oil. When I saw Charlotte and all these other children and families having to move to Colorado, I said, I can't save my dad. I can't save the children, but I can be a vote. And so I told my partner I was going to get my medical marijuana card because here in Arizona it's legal. And he was really astonished that this goody two-shoes businesswoman, spiritual teacher is going to start doing cannabis. And I said, I didn't say I was going to start using cannabis. I just said I'm getting my medical marijuana card because I want to be a political vote. Well, and it's expensive to do it too. Because I got my card and watched all of the medical marijuana documentaries, I thought, look at all the health benefits these people are having. I'm going to play with it. I figured it can't hurt me. It's not going to kill me. Nobody has ever died from cannabis before. So I'm going to try it. Mostly what I found out was a big surprise. Here's my side effects with cannabis. For the whole entire first year, mostly I would use it and I would sleep. For some reason, I don't get high using cannabis. It just put me to sleep. It turns out that that's exactly what my body needed, because cannabis is a homeostatic. And so what that means is that if your system is too high and you're manic, it can calm it down. If you have depression and your system isn't firing enough, it can bring it up back to homeostasis. I found out that we have our entire body filled with an endocannabinoid system with receptor sites. So there's research that is saying that they believe that cannabis and humans evolved together, because wherever humans live, there is cannabis. When I started using cannabis beyond that first year, well, first of all, I got to tell you about that first year, because I slept all the time. It's exactly what my body needed, because with all the stress I'd had, I was so wound up that I couldn't unhook. It was like a low-grade PTSD where I was just stressed all the time. Even with my breath practices and my exercise, when you get piled on with too much stress, it's just too much. And I was becoming impatient, and I just couldn't unwind. And that first year, it just started unwinding me. Actually, immediately, it started unwinding me and making me more patient and calmer in my system. Then I started having other side effects. I didn't have to get up anymore to go to the bathroom 4 times in the night. Now, I always thought I had just the tiniest little bladder in the whole world, because I had always had to watch where any bathroom was, and I just thought I had a tiny little bladder, not something called incontinence. Well, it must be something genetic in my line, because we have a lot of people in my family with small bladders, but now I'm realizing that we might not have small bladders at all. Because when I started using cannabis, I was normal. So whatever was going on my system, it normalized it. I no longer had to bring toilet paper on our hikes, so I could use it 3 times out on a hike. I no longer had to know where all the bathrooms were when I was shopping or when I'm doing international travel. And my hairdresser started asking me, what are you doing differently? And I said, why? And she goes, because your hair is coming back its natural color. With all the stress that had been piled on me, my hair had started to gray and I was aging very rapidly. And the cannabis reversed all of that, and my hair started growing back in its natural color. Then I also realized that I was sleeping through the night, no coughing. So one, I had been having a hard time sleeping besides the sinus problem. And so it helped me with sleep, but it also opened up my sinuses. And that seemed so contradictory, because how can you use something or bring it in with a vapor pen and the sinuses in 5 to 15 minutes open up and I could breathe better than I had been able to breathe for years. There were other benefits that I was receiving. For those of you who are 50 and over, when you get 50, you start getting those aches and pains in the body and in your joints. I no longer ever have those aches and pains. I have better rest. I have a much higher quality of life as the result of using cannabis. Now, I remember that when I was trying to figure out how to use cannabis, I was this clueless white woman. I mean, we're talking clueless white woman here. Knew nothing about this. I tried to ask my partner about it, but he had only used street ganja for maybe about 30 years, and he just thought I was going through some midlife crisis or something. And I said, how can you think I'm going through a midlife crisis if I'm using this like a supplement and it's benefiting the quality of my life so much? And it's a weed that can grow anywhere, for goodness sakes. So he wasn't very much help. And on the internet, it wasn't very much help. It was mostly trying to get the educational information out there about the injustice that's happening around the world with this healing plant. And so finally, I was on the internet and I found learngreenflower.com. That was huge for me because I had been trying to get my education from the dispensary, but they say that it works different for everyone. So just like melatonin that's supposed to help you sleep, for some people it keeps them awake and has the opposite effect. And so they said I had to try everything for myself so I could find out how to use it. And so when Learn Green Flower showed up on the internet, I was thrilled because they were having a 2016 Cannabis Health Summit. And they had all different kinds of speakers on. There were two that particularly made an impact on me. One was a bell curve that was saying that whoever it was that did that session said that cannabis affects you like a bell curve, so that you have a positive effect up to a certain level, and if you take too much, then it starts losing the positive beneficial effects. And so I found for myself that less is more. The second talk that really helped me was called microdosing. Microdosing, when you have a vapor pen or if you have a vaporizer, you can take just the littlest bit and you don't have any of the psychoactive effects. I don't have those effects anyway, but you don't have those psychoactive effects. But what I would find is that in 5 minutes, the pain in my thumb joint would go away. And the pain in my thumb joint, it would get so swollen and hurt so bad that I could not even close a Ziploc bag. And so to see it go down and the pain go away in 5 minutes is shocking. And it was so beneficial to know that I don't have to be in pain at all through the day. I have the left side of my body that got damaged when I was in a skiing accident when I was in college. And I've always had pain on this left side of my body, and especially with my international travel, because when I go to China, it might be 28 to 31 hours by the time I leave my house and arrive where I'm going. So being in the airplane seats for that long, it could really wreak havoc on my body. I don't have problems anymore with those long flights. My body does just fine. Because I can't smoke cannabis and I don't like the smell of it, someone suggested that I go get a vaporizer. And I said, well, where do you get a vaporizer? Because I don't know. And they said, go to a smoke shop. I said, I don't even know where a smoke shop is. And so they pointed one out, and I went into this smoke shop feeling quite shy, like, this is not my kind of place to be. And I go in there and I say, do you have a vaporizer for cannabis? And he did, and he was laughing, at me. But he was also really proud that I was getting myself educated about this. And then he shared a story with me that made a big impact in my personal life. He was talking about his dog and how his dog had a baseball-sized tumor on his forehead. And this man had gotten some cannabidiol oil, or CBD oil, which is the non-psychoactive aspect of cannabis that's helping these children with their epilepsy. And he started to topically put this cannabis oil on his dog's tumor. And the tumor started to shrink. And he said at the point that I talked to him, the tumor was the size of a golf ball now instead of a tennis ball. So that was exciting for me because I have a white cat. Her name is Diva, short for devotion, Diva. She is the sweetest little thing, and I love her nearly more than anyone. And she was rapidly losing weight, and she would throw up 3 and 4 times a day. And we thought we were going to lose her. But when I started using cannabis and then I heard this story about this guy's dog, I thought, well, I'm going to go to the dispensary and I'm going to get some thick CBD oil and give it to my cat and see if it makes a difference. I can tell you immediately it made a difference. 1, she stopped throwing up 3 and 4 times a day. And 2, it gave her her appetite back. And she is now back to being my beautiful, pretty, happy little white kitty that I get to enjoy. So on and on, I was having these beneficial effects with cannabis. One night, my partner rolled over and he said to me, I don't like it that you're using marijuana. And I remember thinking, and I said to him, you have seen the quality of life changes in me. You have seen them. You knew what it was like when I couldn't sleep all night long and when I was waking you up too, and how I was aging and so stressed all the time, and how this has benefited me. And you used it for nearly 30 years recreationally. And now you just think that I'm having a midlife crisis on something. I said, I seriously do not look at this plant. What I'm doing with cannabis, with the edibles at night when I sleep, and with the vapor pen so I can microdose during the day, I seriously do not look at what I'm doing with cannabis any differently than taking any of the rest of the supplements that I have and use as I go through my own aging process. And I feel like I can go through my aging process with so much more grace. And he has softened over time as he has seen how passionate I am about this plant, because I don't like injustice. I don't like when the government takes away our rights. And this plant, it needs to be free. I saw how it helped my friend die. I know that the Rick Simpson oil could have saved my dad from losing half of his face. We see the research and the benefits. If you look, the information is there. And if you're not looking, that means, if you don't know, it means you're not looking, because it's all over the internet. You can find it. I feel so privileged that I can age with grace with this plant and not be a cranky old lady, more brittle and brittle as we get older. You know how people get so cranky when they get older? This is totally softening all of those rough edges when the body chemistry starts to age and have that chemistry go through it. When I was in my research phase of cannabis and how do I do things and how do I use it and what kind of forms can I take it in, it was so difficult for me to find any of that information. And we have a woman who lives close here who started a consulting business to help people like me get our medical marijuana cards and give us some education about it. And so I asked her about addiction, cannabis and addiction. And she said something to me that I always remembered, but I didn't appreciate until later. And it was this: Ellie, you can't get addicted to cannabis. You don't. What you do get addicted to is feeling good. And I can attest to that because I don't have those achy bones and those swollen arthritic thumbs. I can sleep at night. My bladder is normal, so I can have a normal life. So many benefits that way. But I know about addiction. We have a close family member who's a heroin and crystal meth addict for many years, lived with us off and on, and it was horribly stressful going through those years. I have an alcoholic brother who was giving me death threats as I was dissolving the family estate. I had my oldest brother who, from a young man or late teenage all the way into his 40s, who was a drug addict. I know the heart-breaking, soul-stealing qualities of life that happen with addiction. I know addiction up close and personal. And I can tell you that cannabis is nothing like the opiates and other drugs that are out there that are harming our people. This is a natural medicine. And while I can't save my dad, maybe this message can go out to your dad. Maybe this can help one of your family members or you. Because I think it's important that ordinary people like me get out and start talking about our experience with cannabis. And I was truly clueless until learngreenflower.com showed up on the internet. And that was a huge breakthrough for me, and I continue to watch these programs because I continue to educate myself about the healing properties of cannabis. Well, that's my story, and I hope that you can find your own sweet spot with pot. Can't believe I'm saying that. I am Ellie Drew, and thank you for listening, and I hope you share this with your families.